Right, all right, guys. So we're back for episode 8, which is one that I'm extremely excited about because it's Druid. Anybody who's watched the YouTube channel for a while or watches over on Twitch obviously knows that I'm a big Druid player, and it will be no surprise, even though at the moment I'm playing a Paladin, but it will be no surprise that we're joined by Pastel again, because Pastel was on the early ones, I think episode 1 and 2. Where we was talking a lot from a Druid perspective as well, actually. So then we've got Fake QT. Obviously, you know Fake QT is every single week without fail. So that's good to have you here again, Fake. And we've got Toren. So Toren is a very, very big private server player. He's done years and years of raiding, high-end content. So like Sunwell Plateau. He's going to, explain a little bit of his experience in a minute, but also very, very experienced as a feral and resto in PvP. So I think there's going to be a lot of knowledge flying around in here, which hopefully you'll get some useful information out of. So I won't bother doing an introduction to me or to Fake QT, but Pastel, we'll start with you. Just, give us a bit of background, why you're here.
Yeah, started playing feral back in TBC, or Druid anyway, and started playing as feral. Started primarily just PvPing and Wrath of the Lich King, and PvP predominantly for most of the expansion since, but not done much PvE since Wrath, really. Not a high end anyway.
Cool. And Toren, yeah, just a little bit about yourself, your experience.
Yeah, I also started playing at Classic, but I was very young, so I just continually progressive into Cataclysm, then I stopped, and then 7 years ago I picked up a TBC private server, and I chose Feral, and I played Feral for almost until Classic came, so a lot of Feral stuff in TBC.
Cool. Fake QT, anything you want to say? How excited you are to be here again?
Yeah, hello everyone. That's about it.
Very, very extensive that was. Cheers.
Nah, it's nice to see everyone. And it's cool to have 2 new guys here to talk about Druid, because I liked playing Druid, but I've never really done it in TBC. So looking forward to hear more about that class for sure.
Yeah, as I say, I'm confident that that both Toren and Pastel are going to add a lot to this conversation, because as I say, I'm aware of both their experience, and yeah, it's extensive. So we'll start with, we're going to follow, like I've said, the same sort of pattern as we did for the Warlock one. So we're going to look at each spec first. I'll keep the talent tree open just if anyone wants to see it. Not particularly going to fill it out, although we may at some point start making some specs. If we can't decide on things between us, then we might need to actually start putting some points in talent trees. But we'll go balance, then we'll go feral, then we'll go resto, and we'll start with PvE and PvP viability in TBC. So if we start with balance first, and I'll kick off. I'll kick off when it comes to balance, because I've probably been playing balance more recently than any of you other guys I would have thought, on the basis that I was a main balance druid on Karazhan recently. So from a PvE perspective, I would say you're going to want 1. You're going to want 1 in your raid, definitely. They bring 5% crit for your warlocks. So if anybody who's watching back hasn't seen our group composition video that we done last night at live on stream, it's on YouTube now. Check that out. Sorry, it's a shameless plug, but you'll see there that every guild's going to want at least 1 boomkin in their 25-man raid team. So key things for me when it comes to PvE viability for balance is the 3% hit that you give to your melee and range. So that's not casters, that's ranged as in just hunters. But that means that they can drop hit and take more useful stats, as long as you know that you've got that solid boomkin who's going to be in every raid. You've got your 5% crit. The only thing from a PvE perspective that I personally dislike as a boomy is the last talent point, is the treants, which you'll rarely take. And it's, when you've got the other 2 specs that get a really, really cool ability, really iconic ability, actually, both trees get. And then you've got these treants that just run around and die to AoE and just pointless using. And then from a PvP perspective, as balance, they can hit quite hard. They're a bit of a... They are a meme spec in PvP, to be fair. I've not personally, and again, this is where Pastel and Toren, you're probably, and even Fake QT, going to be able to have more input on this than me. I've not really seen many balanced druids, pushing high ratings in TBC. But that's sort of my overview from a personal perspective, before we start digging into individual talents and stuff, you know, that I'd put them, definitely every raid's going to want one for PvE. PvP is probably where they start falling down a little bit. So we'll go around the table. We'll go with Toren. So Toren, give us your views, you know, on a balanced Druid in TBC.
Well, I think the balance route, as you said, is like really vital. It's like definitely not something you cannot lose, but it's really a great addition to the rank because of the 3% hit and then the crit aura. And Boomkin is always like viewed as a support class. Like his DPS can get high, but not as high. I mean, one of the pictures I've sent you, I think it was the Brutalus fight. The screenshots, like the Boomkins are usually like the bottom of the meters. They can, like best I did with the Boomkin on Brutalus fight, which is the last fight of the Sun. No, not well, one of the last bosses, and it's like a patchwork type fights where you just like burst your DPS in like a 5-minute time span. And the best DPS I did was like something above 2k. And while like hunters, warlocks, they can usually they're like something between around 3.4k DPS. They can go up to 4k if like really stars align, but Boomkin cannot really go above 2k. But then, as I said, he brings a 3% hit, which is not only good for hunters, melees, but also for the tanks. And it's really a huge boost for the tanks since they don't have to like prioritize hit rating, or like they just need to get 6%. They don't need to get more, so they can go for more threats, more expertise, more avoidance, more HP. And yeah, so Boomkin is definitely viable in PvE. And like, for example, me, I use like some of the jewel crafting necklaces, which were boosting also another members of the party. There are two types. One is giving like something around 30 spell power for like whole of your party, and the other one is giving like 2% crit for the whole party. But you need to wear it, and the necklace is shit for you, but really great when it comes to like for the raid DPS.
Yeah, agree. Pastel, what about you? What's your thoughts on Boomy?
In terms of from Classic to TBC, really nice to have. I mean, you're not both know, it's really nice to have an extra rebirth and extra innovate in TBC. It actually means it seems more impactful to have those sort of raid utility spells in TBC than it does in Classic. Probably because we're going from a 40 man to a 10 man, more noticeable in a lot of the compositions. In 10 and 25, just to have extra innovates and things like that. And obviously, you only need one Boomy to buff half your raid, technically. The buffs are nice. I would agree the damage probably isn't there, but you're not always taking Druids for damage, threat, or healing, because their utilities, their raid, what they offer the raid is really nice. It's not necessarily about them topping the meters. If that's important to you, maybe don't go Boomkin. In PvP, I would say they're not that great, to be honest. Fun for BGs, but if you're looking competitively in Arena, you've got one composition probably, which is LSD, which is the Lock Shaman Druid. I think it was Destro Warlock that you played it with. They're not that great, and in the BGs they're going to be fun, but they're probably not going to be, not like I said, not competitive. On Endless Ladder, I don't think there was any Boomies, none at all.
Yeah, I couldn't see it.
I could also jump into PvP because I kind of forgot that. I mostly played 2 versus 2, and I know that the Boomkin, or most likely Restokin, which is not really a Boomkin, but you get a Boomkin talent, but you are like semi-healer, semi-DPS. Restokin was good when you had like not that great gear, like when you didn't have like full Brutal Assault, full Vengeful. Then like the Rogue and Restokin is kind of good composition, but if you get like to the higher level of your gear, then the Deep Resto is just much better.
Yeah, totally. And Fake QT, finally, thoughts on Boomkin. As I say, we're going to start digging into this a little bit deeper, but yeah, just want sort of an overview.
Yeah, what he actually said there regarding like playing Boomkin and Resto, so half-half, where you get Nature Swiftness, but you also get Boomkin form. They go pretty high, and I think on Endless, they're like the top teams in twos, even in like season 3 right now. So definitely, if you play Boomkin with some resto talents together with a Rogue, you can go really high. They're so good because you get a lot of armor from the Boomkin form, and at the same time you get the swiftness from Resto. so you can do like instant cyclones and stuff like that. Do good healing, but also do a decent amount of dots.
Yeah, so they're still really there as the healer, but they're quite an offensive healer. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, because you have so much CC as a druid. Like you have clone, you have roots, stuff like that. So you can actually help your teammate with some damage when you have like a full CC. So that's why like Boomkin, I would say they're actually pretty decent in 2s at least, not in 3s, but 2s.
Yeah, makes sense. So so we agree that, you know, a balanced druid has got its place in raids. A balanced sort of hybrid, so a hybrid resto balanced druid in PvP, really strong as well. I think probably I wasn't very clear when I was saying, you know, that they're not that great in PvP, a balanced druid. I was talking sort of deep balance, and their primary role is to do damage. But if we're talking sort of, like a resto kin, where your primary goal is to keep your partner alive, but also you've got that offensive ability, then I totally agree. Absolutely, it does work, and we've seen it work. So if we then sort of dig a little bit deeper into these talents, and this is where I don't mind doing a build as we go along, but if we can just go over what the key changes are, like the things that at the moment you see boomkins in raids in Classic, you know, even though they're classed as a meme spec, you don't want many of them, but you know, you do see them, but you are going to see them more, I think, in TBC. It'd be nice to sort of point out to people what the major changes are within the talents and within the abilities that you get, maybe, you know, fresh abilities between 60 and 70 that sort of make them viable now, and even changes to mechanics in the game that make them viable. And by that, obviously, I mean the debuff limit being increased, you know, so now you can actually use dots, which is like a big win for Affliction Warlocks, what we were talking about on the last podcast, but, you know, same applies for Druids. So if we start this time, we'll start with Pastel. I mean, when we look through the talent tree here, and as I say, I'm happy to press on anything you want or highlight anything you want me to highlight, what are the changes that now make this a viable raiding spec?
I believe the hits has changed, hasn't it, in Nature's Reach, is it? Between Classic, I don't think you had that. Not Nature's Reach, there was one that's...
Balance of Power,
extra hit. That's the one, yeah. That wasn't in Classic, was it?
No.
Which is a pleasant change. I would argue that, again, Treant's Force of Nature, kind of a useless, uninspiring last talent. When everyone else has a fun last talent, yours is kind of meh, not that great in TBC. Omen of Clarity and Insect Swarm are swapped around, which does help you if you want to go for that sort of dot and run spec. You still get the Insect Swarm in Boomkin now, and the decreased chance to hit is actually quite useful for raids and stuff as well.
Yeah, and what about sort of, obviously they've always been called Oomkins, and they still do have mana problems in TBC. When I say mana problems, you can manage it with obviously good use of mana pots, and maybe you probably won't have a Shadow Priest in your group. But if you're doing Karazhan or something like that, 10-man content, maybe Zola Man, you might get a Shadow Priest in your group, but probably highly unlikely in an ideal 25-man comp. But obviously that's where I'd like to point out Dream State, which funny enough we'll probably even mention when we start going over the Resto tree as well, because you can go a Dream State Resto build. I don't like it, but we can talk about that when we're actually on the Resto build. But the fact that they added Dream State, so, a mana equal to 4% of your intellect per point, every 5 seconds you get, the mana of it back, which, that it doesn't fix mana problems, but it definitely probably helps you last a little bit longer. I mean, Toren, is there anything in the tree that you'd like to point out, any major changes?
Definitely, as you said, Dream State, and then obviously the improved verifier is something really big, and then from 3% to 5% of spell crit. But also, it's a really small change, but it's something that the Moonkin form is finally giving mana when you hit something with your weapon. And if as a Boomkin you get a feral weapon with like a shit ton of attack power added, that attack power is still like transferring into your Moonkin. So when you hit with a staff as a Moonkin, you are getting like 400 mana back per like 400 mana per like 2 hits usually, because it's a proc chance, it's not like 100%. And usually in a fight that would be a DPS loss, but if you get it's like straight up you just lost your DPS. So this is a way how we can get back up. And on some of the fights, like for example the council, Elidary Council, like the pre-last boss of the Black Temple, they are switching the forms. Like sometimes they are like magic resistant, and sometimes they have high armor. So when they are magic resistant, it's not worth to do your like Moonfire, Starfire stuff. You just go and you smack him with your staff, and then you get mana back, and then you can go full out on during the armor phase with your spells. And that way you can like really get a lot of DPS, since the loot council fight is super long, and you would go if you just go full on DPS with the spells.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think it's something that actually gets missed quite often as well. You know, the fact that you have got that way to get mana back. Yeah, it's something I think you'll see, like you said, you know, knowing the fights in depth, like the Illidari Council. You know, you'll know when is a good time to go into melee, and it's. Whereas you'll probably see a bad Boomkin who will just stand there going, that'd be me. But, you know, the good ones like you, Toren, will go in and, actually switch to a feral weapon and melee. It's a really good point. What about you, Fake QT? Any others that we might have missed between us that you think's relevant?
Oh, it was just like the thing I wrote in your Twitch, but like maybe you should buy dark rooms as well, or start farming them already, because I could see them become really handy if you have mana problems.
Yeah, definitely. I think as a druid, let's say balanced druid specifically, but for even feral, which we'll get to in a little while, it's you're going to be chugging mana pots. You're going to be using dark runes. If you can start collecting them up now, even buying them off the auction house now during Classic, because I guarantee you 100%. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but I won't be. They will be so much more expensive in TBC than they are now. Even if you look at them now and they're 10 gold, they will be 20 gold in TBC, because you've just got less people doing the content to actually get them. You know, you're going to have people who are physically going out of their way to go and collect them. So might be a good little tip for things to do in Classic.
So did you mean Boomkin on Karazhan, Scott?
I main Boomkin on Karazhan, yeah.
How bad were your mana problems in raids?
Absolutely fine in Karazhan, as in, on Karazhan, in Karazhan. Absolutely fine if I had the Shadow Priest in my group. But in 25-man, I wouldn't get the Shadow Priest in my group, obviously. So it would be, I would have issues. I would have to be a little bit tactical with when I'm using mana pots, when I'm using dark runes, you know, selfishly having to use Innovate on myself. You know, if my damage wasn't important, then obviously the Innovate would be for the healer. But the majority of the time, I was just innovating myself. It was the only way I could get for a fight. But saying that, you know, later tiers, absolutely. Tier 6 and Sunwell Plateau, and probably even Tier 5, in all fairness, Boomkins are not going to be anywhere near the top. But in Tier 4 and Karazhan, I was normally fighting for the first place the majority of the time, even above Hunters. Because it obviously, if you're in pre-BIS, or you know you've got some crafted gear, or you know you're lucky and you get Quag's Eye and stuff like that, you can really pump. But it's luck. You know, I could do Gruul and do 1.2k DPS, and then I could do Gruul the following week and do 700. You know, it fluctuates that big because it's all you're basing your damage on is crits. So crit is king. So when we look at the talent tree, Nature's Grace, all spell crits grace you with Blessing of Nature, reducing the cast time of your next spell by 0.5 seconds. And then the majority of boomies will be using like a crit trinket that's got a proc chance, like the one from the last boss in Arcatraz. So chance on crit increases spell power by 320. And then obviously you can force crits a little bit more, well, not reliably, but you can get them a little bit easier if you put in Moonfire in your rotation, obviously, because that's got an extra 10% chance to crit. But it's luck. You know, I could not go stand in front of Gruul and say, I'm going to top the damage this week, because it would just come down to, how many of those Starfires actually crit? I mean, has anyone else on it? Like, so Toren, obviously, I'm assuming that was actually that screenshot that you sent me. That was you playing that Boomkin, was it?
Yeah, that was. I think, there should be like a Heart of the Pit in the chat mentioned. That's the screenshot with the Boomkin, I think. I don't have it open right now.
I've got it here, but I've got it cropped. So I'm going to open your screenshots in a little while when we actually start talking about what each spec can physically do end game, you know, and do reasonably well. So we'll definitely have a look at your recount logs of, Sunwell Plateau, 100%. But is there anything else worth adding at this moment in, as I say, I've already covered Nature's Grace with...
Yeah.
Can you show me the standard build? Because obviously I didn't play Boomy in TBC, and I'm kind of looking at this going, you've got to get Insect Swarm, right?
Yeah. So
It's a no-brainer.
The thing with the Insect Swarm is that Insect Swarm is good in terms of your mana efficiency, but it doesn't do as much damage. If you just want to go and pump as much DPS as you can, then Insect Swarm is kind of a wasted GCD. I mean, you just much rather get more DPS if you just completely ignore the Insect Swarm and go for Starfire. And like there is more types of rotations, I would say. If you want to go like full DPS, get as much DPS as you can get, and go like balls deep, don't care about mana, then you just go full Starfire and Moonfire on your, like, you want to use Moonfire, and when the dot falls off, then reapply it after you finish your Starfire. That's like the most mana intensive and most DPS build you can do. Then you can also do just typical Starfire. That's like something in the middle. If you just go Starfire and nothing else. And then like most mana efficient thing, but also least DPS, is doing the Starfire on like all the time, and Insect Swarm when you like have a dot up. But it's just not gonna do as much DPS as you ignore it, like, and go for Moonfire and Starfire.
Okay, I didn't know if it was actually a must-have. I knew it was in Arena and stuff. Insect Swarm was invaluable in Arena, but I thought for PvE, I didn't know if it was actually something you went for or not.
Yeah, it's good to use if you're moving. If you're having to move, it's not something that you would prioritize. But if it was a boss fight where you was moving, you'd put Moonfire and Insect Swarm up. I mean, early on, it is a damage increase using both, and we're talking now like in pre-bis going into tier 4. It does account for quite a lot of your damage, but again, it's very proc based as well. So what I mean by that is, if you've got a big like Quagmiran's Eye up, you're not really going to waste that on putting dots on. You're literally, as soon as you see Quag's Eye proc, which, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, Quagmiran's Eye is from Slave Pen's Heroic, last boss, and it grants 320 haste, I believe, as well as giving you some spell power just statically. But, you as soon as you see that proc, bang, don't worry about dots, fuck dots, you're not using them. Just get as many Starfires out with that haste, haste bonus as you can. But what I've put on screen here, which I appreciate anyone who's listening back on Spotify or anything like that is not going to be able to see. So it all comes down to subtlety, really. So there's points that you can drop out of these. So if you're having fret issues, you can obviously then start dropping, say, points out of Moonglow. It's going to make you less, mana efficient, if you like. But if you're dying when you're on full mana because you're over aggroing anyway, you're probably not going to need it. But there's a lot that you can play around with. And it's like even here, I've put 2 in Brambles just because odds are the Boomkin's going to be the one who's got it improved. You could pick up Nature's Grace, Nature's Grasp, sorry. The early talents are quite boring, I want to say. The only ones that are really essential is Starlight Wrath, because it reduces your cast time of Starfire by 0.5 seconds. That's all you're going for. You want the 4% crit so you can get down to Vengeance. You want Improved Moonfire for the extra crit chance to, obviously, further down in the tree, proc Nature's Grace more often. But outside of like getting down to those, some of it's boring. You need Nature's Reach because it's going to give you increased range of balance spells, which obviously the further away you can stand, the safer you are. You could drop Insect Swarm out if you wanted to, but I would take it as I say because I would use it when I'm moving, and I'd certainly use it early on in the tiers. But then the rest of it, it is threat driven. It's if you're over aggroing the tank, which trust me, Boomkins do over aggro early on, no matter how if you're talking a fresh TBC launch, not even fresh, but even a progressive, we're going from 60 to 70. The tank's gear is going to matter a lot when you're playing a Boomkin. And the only way that you can negate that is by putting more points in Salty. I don't know, Toren, what sort of threat did you used to have threat issues? I know you probably predominantly played it in Sunwell Plateau, didn't you? But
yeah, it was in Sunwell Plateau, but funny enough, I still had like some of the issues, but it was mostly because I couldn't hold my horses, and when I saw like Brutalus coming next to me, I was like, oh, Starfire, I have to like load it up because it like 3 seconds or like 2.5 second cast time, so I can like preload it, and when it comes, I can just like blast it and start going with my rotation. And yeah, Boomkin, he has long cast time, but he can really like do the 8k damage in one hit, so it can really spike up and give you a threat at the beginning. So yeah, threat was an issue.
How many points out of interest did you use to put in Salty? Can you remember?
Usually like what I had left, so that was usually like 2 or 3, I think, not more. I mean, I also tried to like experiment with the force of nature and like do less into subtlety and use the force of nature and like, for example, pre-pull it before the boss. So like I use the force of nature, then drink up, and when the boss comes, like I still have like, I don't know, 20 seconds of the force of nature, and they can like dish out more DPS. But it's, as you said, it's not that worth because they have too little HP. And since they are scaling with spell power, they like do more damage, but the HP is like really shit, and they die as flies.
Yeah, definitely. QT or Pastel, you got anything to add? Because I think we've probably just had a fairly decent length discussion just around the balance talents. But
I was just going to say, in terms of the tier sets, tier 4, 5, and 6, is there actually anything good for Boomkin? Is it actually exciting, or do you just go for off pieces?
the 2 set's brilliant. The 2 set again, just because of on the basis that we have problems with mana. So the 2-piece, let me check and tell you exactly what it is, but it gives you like 300 mana chance on spellcast, something like that. There's the tier sets in general for Boomkin across the board is not amazing, but yeah, as I say, the 2-piece tier 4 sticks out. If anyone can find out what the 4-piece is, that would be good, because I'm going to struggle. I've got so many screens open.
Reduces the cooldown of Innovate by 48 seconds. So,
that's right, yeah.
It's not too bad. It's not too bad. The 2 sets where it stands out.
From what I remember, the 4 set of the tier 5 was really great. Like you wanted to keep your 4 set of tier 5 for as long as you could, because there was increase your Starfire damage against the target afflicted with Moonfire or Insect Storm by 10%. So your main damage is the Starfire, and the 4 set bonus was like increasing your Starfire damage by 10% when you had Moonfire or Insect Storm, which was like all the time up. So I know that one was great, and that was like, there was some kind of a border when you didn't want to switch for tier 6 until you had some pieces. I'm not sure how was it, but the tier 5 4 set bonus is really great.
Yeah, and tier 6. So when you move on to tier 6, it's Moonfire duration for the 2-piece, and then crit chance, which is nice. Crit chance of Starfire by 5%. But yeah, like you're saying, when you're comparing it to actually tier 5, I mean, I'm going to say, obviously the overall gains are going to be nice, as in the static spell power and the crit and stuff like that you get. But the 2-piece is useless on tier 5, quite literally. Yeah, useless. But 10%. Yeah, 10% Starfire damage versus 5% Starfire crit. I think, yeah, you'd have to wait till you've got the 4 set of tier 6 before you actually equipped it, I would say. Anything else?
The 4 set of tier 6 was good because you could get it on off pieces like the bracers, boots, and I think belt was the 3rd piece, and then you can just like sacrifice one of the heads, chest, I don't know which one was the best, but you could sacrifice one of those and then have the tier 5 until you get like the real Sunwell Plateau pieces, like the chest from Muru or I don't know, head from KJ.
Yeah, makes sense. So, all right, so Boomkin, I think I would say we've probably exhausted all topics, and I think actually when we move on to Feral, it's going to be the most exciting. So before we move on to Feral, Fake QT, Toren, Pastel, all happy? Yeah, happy that we've pretty much covered everything anyone would need to know about a balance.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Treon, Dead in the War, yeah, just rubbish.
Yeah.
Like I could actually see mages, because there's not gonna be so many mages in a raid group like Classic. So I could see them, maybe some of them actually wanted to swap to a Boomkin instead.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I did actually talk about this last night, and I appreciate it's going off a little bit off topic, but it wouldn't be one of our podcasts if it didn't, would it? But we're assuming, just from private servers and everything like that, what the overall meta is going to be, and then we're going to want loads of warlocks, loads of hunters, and it's going to remain the same. But if the armor values are really low in comparison to private servers, or what we remember, and their health pools are lower and stuff like that, what we've seen basically with classic vanilla as it is now, where you've got Valstraz dying in like 15-20 seconds, whereas before it used to destroy guilds because they couldn't get past it. I appreciate the skill cap of people and the fact that everyone lived on private servers before a classic release has had an impact on that. But if the bosses were falling over in like 30 seconds, you could get to the point where actually rogues and mages are actually better than we anticipate. You know, I appreciate we've got to use the facts that we've got at hand, which is all the private server knowledge and, you know, all what we've seen. But arcane mages, ultimately, if they haven't got to worry about their mana because the boss is going to die before they go, obviously you're going to take more than 2. And the same with rogues. If it dies in, you know, more or less the space of the spike that you get from using Adrenaline Rush and Blade Flurry, again, you know, we could see more of them. I mean, any of you got any thoughts on that, or do you think no chance?
Yeah, definitely. Like, and that's also gonna change the meta. Is leatherworking then gonna be the best, or should you stay engineering? And because in TBC you can craft super Saberchargers, which does like twice as much damage as Sabercharger in Classic. So would that all of a sudden then become actually the best thing to do? So yeah, I don't know. We have to count on what we know so far, but I could see like some misunderstanding when it comes to like how good some of the other professions will be.
Yeah, I agree. As I say, I would say I think it's a possibility. I don't think it's a probability. I can't see it happening, you know, as in all of these things that we see today, the meta in retail that we see today is what was on private servers. You know, that was the meta on private servers. So I'd go out on a limb and say that the meta in private servers is going to be the meta in a classic TBC launch. Personally, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, with classic and probably with TBC, the player base is the game's own worst sort of enemy, in the sense that if you want to play a druid and you're worried about not being in the meta and you go and roll a class, you're just kind of feeding into it. If you want to play a druid, I'd definitely say play a druid. Break the meta and do what you want. They are fun classes.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so good. Boomkin. Talents, you know, PvE, PvP viability covered. We can tick that off. So let's move on to Feral. And this is one, obviously, that I'm quite excited to talk about. And I know Pastel and Toren both will be as well. So I'll tell you what, Toren's kicked off a couple of times. So Pastel, give us your PvE, PvP, just a nice overall rundown of Feral. DPS.
DPS, well, we'll say DPS and tank, essentially. I mean, you can basically get DPS and tank talents with no punishment, really. You can pick DPS talents and tank talents at the same spec without any punishment, I'd say, or very little punishment. You won't have any threat issues if you go for DPS talents. I'd argue you can get rid of the 15% threat and still be fine. You'll be fine. You'll have fun being this versatile spec that can do both.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'll be honest with you, everything I've tanked on private servers, I've never had Feral Instinct, which is, that additional threat. And, like you say, never had any issues because they're threat machines already.
Yeah, I mean, the threat's built into Lacerate. You don't have to do damage with Lacerate. It's just the ability itself causes high threat.
Yeah, definitely. So what about, you can do both, but what's your views from, say, like a damage perspective? As in, would you take a Feral DPS Druid? Let's pretend he hasn't got an off tank. He hasn't got to do anything. We're just saying he's going to join the raid. He's just going to DPS. Would you take it over a rogue or a warrior? Or
yeah, definitely. I mean, he's probably not going to have to innovate himself. So that's a free innovate somewhere. That's a rebirth somewhere. Again, really used for utility. You've got the Pharaoh Fire. You have always got that backup option. I know he's not meant to be a tank, but if a tank goes down, this guy can jump into tank. He won't be defense cap, but he'll be able to tank quite competently for 20, 30 seconds, maybe more. You save yourself a wipe in most cases.
Yeah, totally. What about you, Toren? What do you think? As I say, just an overview before we start digging deeper.
Yeah, of course. Well, I would say Feral DPS is viable, but if you get like a warrior, he can just pump up more. It's like you're getting more DPS from a warrior, but you get like more hybridity or options from Feral that he can always, as Pastor said, you can innervate, you can rebirth, but his DPS is gonna be just always a little bit smaller. Not much. It's definitely not something that would prevent me like, don't take him, it's shit DPS, it's just not worth it. But it's always there. Like, it's probably if you have like the same level of a warrior and same level of a Feral is always going to be lower a little bit.
Yeah, I think as well, the skill cap for a feral is going to be a lot higher as well, you know, with power shifting and managing your mana. Because essentially, even though, yeah, like you said earlier, Pastel, you know, you potentially are going to innovate a healer, you know, your damage output is quite driven by your mana pool still. So,
Yeah.
Fake QT, you know, I appreciate you haven't played a feral, but I'm sure you've seen loads of him in raids. You know, what's your thoughts overall as a feral?
Yeah, like as mentioned, the fact that you can always like help tanking in case someone wipe, or like if the tank dies, you can always res, and like you can always off tank as well. So I feel like they're really good. And like as you said, what if the meta changed and all of a sudden, arcane mages will actually be a thing in Karazhan because you can kill the bosses so fast. Then having that extra innovate is definitely good. And the buff you provide as well with the crit, I think that's really, really awesome. So definitely, Feral, I could see them being a thing in raiding.
Yeah, totally. So now, time for my completely unbiased opinion on feral druids. I think they're godlike in the right hands. I think a good feral who really knows the intricacies of the class and understands power shifting, watches for energy tick timers, you power shifts optimally, and also doesn't just, you know, go and read a 5-sentence guide online that tells you to keep rip up, and, you know, you understanding where your damage is really coming from. I think they can pump, and I've seen them pump, as in I've seen them topping damage meters on Magferrodon, Gruul, High King Mulgar, Karazhan bosses. Not all Karazhan bosses, because it is still quite a melee, unfriendly expansion. You know, hunters, warlocks, even mages, you know, just ranged in general do have an easier time. But there's certain fights where melee have an easier time, just not as many. But feral can absolutely compete in earlier tiers.
With the DPS, there is a bit of a catch-22. If you've got a feral tank, your feral DPS is going to find it so much easier because he'll never have to switch mangle into his rotation. But if you've got to micromanage your own mangle, it's only a 12-second debuff, so you do have to micromanage it. It does become a little bit harder. You do get punished for missing it, or not having enough energy, or just missing, or anything like that. If you've got a feral in there who's keeping mangle up 100% of the time, your DPS will profit. But it's whether you want to do that or not. Take 2 ferals.
Yeah, and you've also got to rely on that feral tank. So obviously, Pastel, I've raided with you. I've raided with other feral tanks where I've been a pure cat, just pure feral DPS. And I, you know, 100%, when I know Pastel's tanking, I don't even look at mangle. I don't even look at the timer because I know it's going to be up 100% of the time. And you do see a massive, massive difference. And I'm talking a couple of 100, you know, which a couple of 100 DPS early on is big. It can make that much difference because you're not wasting like 40 energy. Let me just confirm that that's right. It doesn't say it on the talent calculator. I'm sure it's 40 energy for a mangle. You're not wasting that every 12 seconds. You know, potentially you're getting another shred out. You know, you're having an easier time keeping rip up. Maybe you can even weave in the odd ferocious bite. That will mainly come once you've got your 2-piece tier 4, which your 2-piece tier 4 is chance on hit to give you even more energy. But ultimately, I completely agree with what Pastel said. If you've got a feral tank and then a feral DPS, yeah, the feral DPS is going to be having a really good time. And then, you know, stick him in the group with, you know, a warrior and an enhancement shaman. You know, you're getting a totem twisting enhancement shaman in there. The damage you can put out it's immense, to be fair. And there's fights where I've been miles ahead of other people. But, you know, again, it's quite luck driven. Even you could compare it to Boomkin. As in, you know, if you get unlucky with your 2-piece tier 4 procs, if you foul a power shift, you know, so you try and power shift when you're on global cooldown and you end up stood there hitting with your staff. We've all done it. You look like a dick, but, you know, you're going to suffer. So it's a high skill ceiling, and ultimately, yeah, when you mess up, you get punished hard. So, all right, so we've said, so Feral Cat in PvE. What about PvP? And Toren, I think this is where you can probably shed a lot of light on it, because yeah, I personally I've done Gladiator, but only as Resto. I've never really seriously PvP'd other than in Wrath as a feral.
Yeah, feral was just my pure love at the first sight. I mean, first I was raiding as a feral. I got a lot of good gear, and so I had some pieces from I needed from PvE, and then I finished it with some pieces from PvP, and that was pretty much God mode. Like the DPS that Feral can dish out is immense. I was usually, when we were playing like 2 DPS against healer and DPS, Feral was always like the top DPS all the time. The thing is that we just don't have the heal reduction and slow. That's the only thing that Feral doesn't have, but he just has that much more damage for the people. And usually when Feral goes for armor penetration, he can do immensely great. And I also think a lot of people were like, oh, Feral, that's not for PvP, that's not for arena, it's just not meta, you can get destroyed. In the last couple of years, it was changing on private servers. Like I know, like some people, some YouTubers like Uzbekimiska and stuff, people like those, they went to be top players as Ferals, and the composition for Feral like also like got different, because everybody before was like, oh well, you gotta play Resto Druid with Warrior, or Resto Druid with Rogue, or Resto Shaman with Warrior, something like stuff like that. But now it's like Resto Shaman, or like Resto Elemental Shaman with Feral Druid is really great, and then Rogue with Feral and Beastmaster with Feral. Those three combinations are really strong, and you can really pop off in like season 3 and season 4.
What was your partner when you when you was PvPing as a Feral?
The highest push that we got was with Beastmaster Orc, and I was Toren Feral Druid. That was the highest rating we've got, and that was like 2.3k, I think. That was like 100 above the shoulder requirement.
That's decent. What about you, Pastel? I know you got Gladiator in season 4, was it? Or no, it was season 1. I can't remember what it was.
I got rank 1 in season 12, but that was many. That was like Cataclysm, I think. But yeah, in TBC, I do feel they're okay. You can play some fun comps. You can play like Kitty Cleave and stuff because Trauma's up, and you can just basically shred. Again, you don't have to mangle because you've got shred up there all the time. But yeah, you need the healing reduction from the warrior. You need his mortal strike. You're relying on him. Again, they're okay. You don't have a wide variety of comps, and one problem is, I think you'll see RMP dominates the ladder, and you can't barkskin in form. So if you get caught, it's kind of, you're done pretty much. If you get caught in a bad kidney somewhere out of position, you probably see the end of it. But Cyclone is immense in PvP across all specs. So
yeah, is there any sort of hybridy Feral specs that we've seen in PvP? I mean, like Fake QT, have you seen much Ferals, on your PvP adventures? Is there anything outside of the ordinary? We're assuming going all the way down to Mangle, and then getting Omen of Clarity, which basically your PvP spec as a Druid ends up looking quite close to a PvE spec. I mean, is there any strange sort of niche talent builds that we know of?
Nah, not really, because you just mentioned you need Mangle, and when you have Mangle, you don't have that many points left. So yeah, I would say there isn't really any good options beside that. Beside the standard spec where you're mainly Feral and a bit into Omen, and then of course your Nature's Grasp. I guess I can't remember the name of that one, but yeah, there's like just one really good spec. And when I play on my mage, I actually like to play with a Feral Druid because you have good assist, but you can also like Cyclone and the Roots. They're really strong when you put them together with someone that doesn't share the same DR as you. And like you have offensive heals, so really good. You have your Innovate, so like when I'm playing as a mage, it's really nice that I actually can get an Innovate too. So yeah, you're not forced to play Resto, I would say, when you play Druid, if you want to play PvP. But I don't think you should play like Feral and a healer comp. Maybe with a Disc Priest, that could work, but else like playing double deeps are really good in twos.
Yeah. What was you going to say, Pastel?
One thing we do have in terms of talents that's kind of niche to Feral is the Primal Tenacity, which basically holds no bearing in PvE. It's purely a PvP talent. 15% chance to resist, stun, fear, etc. That's quite niche. I mean, you probably won't take that in PvE because I think I tried to experiment it with tank and it was rubbish. It didn't really play any effect. But in PvP, it might be useful.
Oh yeah, I mean 15% stun and fear. Yeah, it's resistors. It's got to be useful. I'd imagine that does sit in a full PvP feral spec.
Yeah, in Classic you had some niche builds like the Flag Runner spec. I don't think you'll see anything like that. I mean, there's always that there. I guess that's kind of half feral, half resto. I don't know what it would look like in TBC though.
Yeah.
Also, slightly come into that, the really underrated talent is the Nurturing Instincts. It's the next to the Fairy Fire, and that one is just great. It's 100% of your agility translates into 100% of bonus healing, and that thing is just amazing. If you get a healing weapon with you, like some healing stuff, you can switch weapons still in TBC and like still can do it. Like it just usually procs you the GCD. But with that thing, you can really pump up a lot of heals. So you just switch the form, get the new weapon, and you can still heal. And in the S4 season, when I had like the KJ healing stuff, I was having around above 2k bonus healing as Deep Feral, and that's just great. That's just amazing. I can no problem heal also some of the like some easy raids with it. And then also in raids, you just pump up DPS. As I said, I was playing like 2 DPS composition. We usually just jump on one of the person, like usually healer or something. We killed him, and usually my partner Hunter was mainly focused. I was usually ignored, except with CC of course. And he was almost dead when we killed a healer, and I still could overheal the warrior. I could still, like for example, throw the warrior into Cyclone and start live blooming the hunter, and still could keep him alive. And also the tranquility got changed in TBC, and now it's really huge healing cooldown. So also you just switch the form, switch the weapon, throw 1-2 life blooms, and drop tranquility, and you can just go from 0 to 100% in no time.
Yeah, it is a very good. I've just actually changed the talent calculator on screen because for some reason the other one wasn't actually showing Nurturing Instinct as how it should be. It was showing it as 50% of your strength, which
talent, like in first phases or like first patches, it was translated from strength. I'm not sure it was also like 100% strength. I think it was only like 50% of strength. But in the 2.4.3 patch, it's 100% of your agility.
Yeah, I just noticed that as well.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd imagine at a guess, I think we're going to go into 2.4.3 itemization and everything anyway. So I would probably say it will be 100% of your agility. Which, yeah, it is a very nice talent, and the fact that you get the extra heals when you're in cat form, I know it doesn't mean too much, but it's still it's still free healing, and it's a talent you're going to take anyway.
It's like building the warlock, and also I think it's kind of good for PvE too, because I was like having my talent build which was for the tank and for PvP, and I had to sacrifice some person there, some person there. Like I could have better outcome with like a deep PvP spec. But I had both of them because, well, nobody has the money for respecking all the time. And Nurturing Instincts is also good for PvE because you can pre-heal yourself. Like when you're about to pull, you can just throw Reju or Regrowth for yourself, which is 20-second hot, and you just jump into the fight. You can charge, and you can still like getting quite decent heals. As I said, like I had 2k bonus healing, so Regrowth is still potent, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
yeah,
go on, Pastel.
I was going to say, I seem to remember one time we were doing Shade of a Round, and I think you healed from 50% of the boss fight. And you were feral, and I think our healer went down, and you healed 50% of it, didn't you? And we just ended up getting a clear as you was feral healing for half the fight.
Yeah, it's effective. It works. Obviously, again, mana's going to be an issue. I mean, I'm surprised that I actually got to do that, and I wasn't from power shifting my ass off for the first 10 seconds, but. Yeah, like you say, it's the versatility of a druid which makes them what they are. You know, they do reasonable damage, as feral or boomkin, exceptional tanks, exceptional healers, but it is just everything else outside of that they bring. So is there any key talents that we want to sort of like, or key changes? I mean, obviously Mangle, we'll talk about Mangle, but is there anything outside of that, that's changed other than Nurturing Instincts? We spoke about it already. That's really makes a big difference.
This new survival talent's pretty nice.
Go on. What was you, Toren? What was you gonna say first?
Sorry. Well, the improved the pack. He's healing like 4% of your maximum HP. That's great in both, like sort of a PvE because you can still heal yourself as a tank a little bit. In solo content is just amazing. You can also solo one of the bosses in like outward, not the outward bosses, but the drakes you need to farm for Badge of Tenacity. You can solo the drakes with the talent because you're just healing so much. And then for PvP, it's just also immense. It's just super great because you are healing a lot of HP back just from hitting and just doing your DPS, your normal rotation.
Yeah, definitely. And Pastel, sorry, you was going to say something as well?
If you are deciding you want a tank or maybe you want to fill in as tank, you need to have Survival of the Fittest. You said no-brainer. As DPS, you get the 3% stats increase as well, and you want to take it. But if you're planning to tank, you absolutely have to have this talent. I mean, there wouldn't be any reason you wouldn't take it anyway, but it's a really nice talent to have, and it's quite vital. People miss out that reduces the chance to be critically hit by 3%.
So what effect does that have? I know what effect it has, but let's pretend somebody doesn't know what is that going to do for you?
It goes towards your defense cap and everything, doesn't it? In terms of if you want a tank, you get 3% chance to be reduced to be critically hit. You still do get, I forget the word for it now.
Crushing blows.
Crushing blows, yeah, you still do get crushing blows, but that's actually not as bad as I initially thought. When I was tanking, I was really worried about getting destroyed by some of the crushing blows, especially on the last boss of Kara. But it actually wasn't that bad. You can actually get by on crushing blows without being a complete wipe. Pharaohs are very competent. As long as you have this, you'll be fine.
Yeah. Being uncrittable is obviously number one priority as a feral tank. And as you say, even when you're getting crushing blows, it's not quite as damaging to a feral as it is to the other tanks, just purely due to your massive health pool and being able to armor cap so early on. Well, 4-piece tier 4 and bang, you're armor capped. Yeah, very strong tanks. I mean, the only the other thing that I'd sort of like to point out is things like Savage Fury. Obviously 20% for 2 points on Mangle, which the reason I want to point it out is because it could potentially be 2 wasted points. Because back to Pastel's point of if you've got a feral tank, you're probably not going to Mangle. So there's a lot of flexibility in the feral tree that people probably miss. They'll just look and go, this is the best feral DPS spec. But actually, it depends on your group comp and what you're expected to do, and you can free up points and put them in, maybe more useful places. If you plan on ever tanking, if you're pure cat, then and you've got a feral tank, you might not want Savage Fury. But it would fall into the majority of specs still. And obviously we've already covered Primal Tenacity, which actually is very, very strong PvP talent. But outside of those, I think the nice thing was Primal Fury. That was an addition which we've not actually mentioned, which at the moment it's in 2 separate trees in Classic, isn't it? So you've got your cat version, that gives you an extra combo point, and then you've got your bear version that gives you double rage. Now it falls into the same one. So this is what makes a feral druid so competent as both a tank and a DPS in the same spec, because you're freeing up points all over the place, where before you had to split them into what you wanted to sort of specialize in.
Yeah, that's a very welcome change to see some of these homogenization of talents where they're just saying, we've made you pick before, you can actually just have both now. It's really nice to have a little hand me up from Blizzard.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there, before we move on to Resto, is there any more for any more? Anyone wants to mention about Feral in PvE or PvP, or the talents or the new abilities? I mean, no one's mentioned Maim.
Maim. Yes, we do get a new ability called Maim. It's okay. I mean, it's not as strong as some of the. It's an incapper, isn't it? It's not a stun technically, or.
It's an incap, yeah. So any damage will break it.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen it as a stun like it is in future expansions, but it's still nice. If you're doing world content, being able to main someone for 5 seconds, you could basically get 3 globals for a life bloom or into a cyclone. You can definitely PvE or do solo content very easily with main.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually what I use it for, is open world content. As in, so if I'm killing a mob, I'll maim, let my energy go back up, and then get a shred. Because on private servers, yeah, you can front shred, front backstab and stuff like that, but on a classic TBC. I personally don't think that's going to be a thing. So being able to maim, go behind them, bang, get a massive 2k shred or 3k shred, whatever, you know. Yeah, it's nice. And sorry, Toren, I think you was going to say something as well.
Yeah, the maim is also great for the PvP because as a feral cat, you don't have any type of interruption for spellcast. Like you still need to switch form for the bear charge or bear stun or war stomp if you're Toren, but you have got nothing. Oh, like of course cyclone, but that's also like a long cast time. So maim is something really great. You can still pump up DPS and then just interrupt the spellcast. And it's like something between a gouge and eviscerate. It's like a smaller version of both of them, but it's still a great thing for a PvP.
Yeah.
And then also, if I could add one thing, I've seen a lot of people like talking about the feral tank. They need to realize the numbers behind it, and of course, I don't want to speak like too much in depth because it's just gonna be too long. But the survival of the fittest, as you said, is like 3% less to be critically hit. So that means that's why you need to use 415 defense rating and not 490 as other tanks. But the thing is, people just say, oh, well, that means I just need to get 415 defense and I'm fine. But no, you need 5.6% of crit immunity or like crit reduction to be critical immune. And you got 3% from talents. So that means you need 2.6% from gear. That either means you can get all of it from defense, but that's quite hard to get or like too limiting, but you can also combine resilience with defense. So you don't need 415 defense rating. You can get like, for example, just 95, and you can get rest from the resilience. So you can combine it. You just together you need 2.6 from gear, and that's something what all ferals should like reconsider at the beginning. And they can like get one PvP item, and they can be completely fixed with the crit immunity, and then just can go for stamina, avoidance, threat, whatever. So that's something what I would really like to say. And like I've seen a lot of ferals mistakenly taking this. Oh well, I need defense rating, otherwise I cannot tank.
It's an absolutely amazing point because some of the really, really strong early items with high armor, high stam, high agility have got resilience on. I'm talking the epic PvP set, you know, the Season 1 Gladiator set. They're really strong. If I remember rightly, the shoulders were like one of the stronger pieces.
You have to get the braces because
it's really hard to get good shoulders like early on the game. Like there is not really a good shoulder piece. Like you need to go really like looking for one good piece of that. So that's why the S1 is really good one. And sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry.
That's right. Yeah, and fake QT. You was about to say the braces. Yeah, the off pieces are really strong as well, aren't they?
Yeah, indeed. And like what you could do right now, if you're planning to play a feral, you simply just grind badges in Classic and you bring them into TBC. Because then you only have to fix the honor, and that's not a lot. I think it's like, 14, 17, 18k maybe? And that's pretty easy to grind. So if you just stack up on marks already, you can get the off pieces so easily. And you can get them without raiding. So yeah, really good point. You have to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because that's the more annoying part of actually getting that gear, isn't it? You know, getting the honor. Yeah, like you say, not an issue, but when you're having to go and get 30 marks from like AV or something like that, when you actually want to be doing Eye of the Storm or whatever, you know, yeah, it's a good point saving those up.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Eye of the Storm. So if you have all the other badges, marks, if you have like 100 AV, 100 Force, and 100 AD. You can simply just farm your honor in Eye of the Storm, and if you need more honor, you simply just convert one of each mark into honor. So that way, you only have to do Eye of the Storm in TBC in the early stages.
Right, guys, be right back. Gonna go do loads of PvP. No. Anyway, so all right, cool. I think that about covers feral. We can move on to Resto if everyone's happy. Looks
yeah.
They're all nodding, so we can move on to Resto. So let's Pastel, Toren, Pastel, you go first. Like, open with your thoughts on Resto for PvE and PvP, and yeah, just work our way around the table. Because while you do, I need to open the door. I've got a jumper on and I'm sweating.
Well, for both PvP and PvE, Resto is no longer a backup healer. It's so competent in both. It's probably the best PvP healer, and in PvE, I'd argue it's probably up there in the top 2 or 3 as well. They just do so well for themselves. They've come from where they go in Classic. If you're healing in Classic for PvP or PvE, and then you're coming back into TBC and you're going to go on the resto, you'll notice such a huge improvement just all around to all their gameplay. Toren, did you PvP as resto as well?
I did a little, because a lot of people are like, oh well, you need to get a resto spec to be like really how pushing your rating, and I was like, I tried it, but since I never played it before, I was shit on it completely. I think the maximum rating as I got with resto, and that was me resto druid with warrior arms, I think the maximum we got was 1.9, and that was not even for a weapon, the gladiator weapon. So yeah, it is great, but I was not really good at it. I was like always like focusing and being skilled at chasing people and not kiting around the pillars and like hiding and getting still in contact with your warrior. I've seen a lot of good druid healers, and it's like really, as they said, like one of the best PvP healers. But yeah, I was not that good at it.
I mean, if someone like Scott can get Gladiator on Resto Druid, anyone can get Gladiator. I mean, the options are, if all the viewers are wondering, can I do good on Resto? This guy got Gladiator here, so...
Right, Pastel, fuck off, mate. No, he's right. He's right. I was probably being carried, to be fair, but yeah, it is a good spec, you know, and you just need to know what your role there actually is. Where, yeah, all right, you've got to keep your partner alive, you've got to keep you alive, but you're also there just to keep that CC train going. You know, you're off the DR. That's why you want to be playing with, if you're a resto druid, playing with, let's say, a warrior, or just someone who just pumps big damage out. Your job is CC, because your HOTS should manage the healing itself, you know, keeping your HOTS rolling on the warrior while you're off just controlling the fight. And I think that is actually where the difficulty comes from it. You know, if you compare it to, let's say, a paladin, you know, a holy paladin, really, all right, they've got hand of justice, and they can, you know, blessing of freedom and stuff like that, but really they're just focusing on healing and keeping their target, their partner alive. Whereas a druid, it's a bit different. Sometimes you'll be well out of range of your partner because you'll be running off into the distance, going and doing your own thing, but you know that your HOTS are going to keep them going. I love it. For like in TBC, my druid is going to be my PvP character, and I will be resto. I've decided that recently because obviously I'm starting to fall in love with my prop paladin, if I'm honest with you. But yeah, I want to push for Gladiator in Season 1. So if anybody out there is any good and wants to carry me, feel free. He's going to roll on Mirage Raceway and carry me, it's fine. So, apologies, obviously I did step away and open the door. Did you speak, Toren, about a resto druid in a PvE like environment? How many of them you might want in a raid, their usefulness, etc.?
Haven't yet, so I can go over it kind of quickly. As I said, also the resto was not really my spec, so also in PP I have experience in Black Temple and everything up to Black Temple, and also some in Sunwell, but not as much, definitely not as much as the Cat, Boomy, and Bear. But yeah, one more thing for PvP, sorry, I forgot to mention, the Druid. The great thing about Druid is that he doesn't need to cast pretty much anything and still be super good at healing, like his Life Blooms and Reju and Swiftman. None of them requires cast, so they cannot be quick kicked. You just need to go for a Healing Touch, which is rarely used, Regrowth, and Cyclone and Roots. Those are 3 spells that can be kicked, nothing else. And that's something really great. So Rogue can keep you down, but not as much as, for example, Resto Shaman. And yeah, for the PvE, well, Resto is really great. Usually just 1-1, but I've seen using 2, like for example in Brutalus to heal the burn targets. So usually just 1-1 or 2. I think 1 is definitely enough. You can get 2 if you have like a good friend or you know someone who is good at being Resto, then you can definitely bring 2. I wouldn't really go for more than 2 Resto Druids, definitely not 3. Like it's not a Shaman, it's not a Priest, those you can bring more than 3. But the Resto Druids I would not. But they're still great at healing, like their bonus healing, their spirit, they don't need our own inner rate, especially in like later tiers, so they can always give it out to priests. And one last thing, like maybe like a little bit more in depth, is that in Wrath of the Lich King, the spell haste was like improving how quickly your ticks of heal over time ticked. Like if you got enough haste, you could get like, for example, your life bloom didn't tick like 6 times, but it ticked 7 times. That's not the thing in TBC. But you still want to go spell haste for a druid because it reduces your global cooldown time. Normal global cooldown time is, I think, 1.5 seconds when you have no spell haste. But if you got one certain border of spell haste, which I really don't know from the top of my head, but you can get it down to 1 second global cooldown, and that's on all of your spells. That also means if you are casting or if you are just drawing the instant spells, it's still your global cooldown is just 1 second, which is really great.
Yeah. I was actually just going to look at the what the haste breakpoint is because what you're saying is absolutely right. But I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. I know it's basically unachievable until tier 6 onwards because there's just no haste, is there?
In terms of the PvE healing rotation, how fun did you find healing in PvE, Scott? Because it didn't look great.
In PvE,
it looks amazing, but doesn't look very fun.
Yeah, I'll be completely honest. So, it's dog shit. It's not. I don't enjoy it. You know, literally just looking at your life bloom add-on and just making sure that it's always green. So it means you've got 3 stacks rolling. Outside of that, I mean, again, this is back in Toren's point up of you don't need your own innovate. You don't. It's more or less impossible to go even with like shit gear. And you will top healing meters. You'll also heavily top over healing meters. But you just don't feel like you're doing a great deal. But when you look at the meters, you really are. You're having a big impact. But it's arguably quite a lot of it is healing that's not needed. And I know it sounds a bit counterproductive, but if you imagine a tank and you've got 3 stacks of life bloom on and they get hit for 100, and then you heal them with your hot tick for 500, it's almost like you might as well not bothered. That's how I used to feel, anyway. But I used to play Resto Druid hardcore, as in proper TBC, like back in the day. Because I don't think the understanding of how strong Feral was during TBC was actually there. There may have been some exceptional ones, but we're going back quite a while. I was a lot younger then. I know I look like I'm about 50, but I'm not. And you still was the majority of druids you would see were actually healers still, from what I remember. And I healed all through to tier 4 all the way up to Sunwell Plateau. And obviously probably toyed around with other specs, but sort of just got pigeonholed into Resto, which I believe the majority of druids did back then. It's private servers that have changed our understanding, but I genuinely think we were just all a lot younger. It was new, I don't know. To me, from memory, Feral came alive in Wrath of the Lich King, but again, that's going purely by memory, not by facts.
Yeah, I think Scarm Tank was saying, when he decided to do Feral Tank in Classic, and for TBC, I think he made a tank for both. He was saying, they were just telling him, you can't do it. It's a meme spec. It can't be done. But he's proven through the private server and now playing it on live as well. Feral TBC, like in Classic and TBC, is quite viable in all situations.
Definitely, and I mean. Again, like I don't want to talk too much about Classic, but in Classic, when I just think back to the first, few weeks of raiding, you was unstoppable as a decent Feral DPS. You was topping every fight because you got your best weapon, like from the word go, which makes a big difference. And again, in the same sort of light, when you go into TBC, if you get like Staff of Nature's Fury quite early, if you was lucky enough to get it drop, in your first week of gearing up, like it's such a massive weapon, and you've not got to do all that massive investment in crafting and getting Titan Steel bars and whatever else, primal mites. And just for anyone who don't know what that weapon does, it reduces your mana cost of shape shifting, which is obviously very nice, and a massive amount of attack power. It's pretty much the best weapon you're going to get until the one from Ilhoof, which is hit and got more attack power. But that's not Resto. I don't know why we went off on a tangent again. So Fake QT, you've been quiet. Come on, for Resto Druids in PvE, what do you think?
I don't have a lot of knowledge. That's why I've actually been quiet. It feels like I've tried them maybe like 5 years ago or something on a private server, and I felt like when you did dungeons early on, they were really powerful, like really powerful, compared to like a lot of the other healers. So I could definitely see them being really good early on when you do heroics, for example, or normal dungeons. But overall, yeah, I don't have a lot when it comes to PvE.
Well, I think I just sort of compare them. You've got to be comparative. You've got to look and go, right, well, what does this Resto Druid bring? Yeah, he brings great tank healing, great sort of group, just small heals, but, you know, obviously hots, just hotting up the raid, keeping them going on fights like, what's it called? Never Spite, things like that, where there's a lot of small damage going around over the entire group. You know, yeah, they're strong. But then when let's compare them directly to a Resto Shaman. Resto Shaman can buff their group like through the roof with their totems and bring Hero for your locks or for your hunters, or Bloodlust if you're Horde. Sorry, Toren. But there's, you know, they bring more, and as long as your group don't die, this is what I've been saying all along. Like when we're making our raid roster for TBC, we are going quite heavily stacked on Resto Shamans over Druids, because why wouldn't you? As long as the raid doesn't die, it doesn't really matter what healer's on top, what healer's on bottom. It's all about what they actually bring, you know, and how they buff and increase the raid damage, which obviously a Resto Shaman has got that sewn up. And then obviously you want an IDS Priest, because an IDS Priest is going to give everyone spell power and healing. So I think the Resto Druid, out of all the free specs, even though it's very strong in PvE, I'd say it probably brings the least to the raid. I don't know how you feel about
that. Tree of Life itself is really nice. Doesn't it give everyone increased healing on your tank, I believe, or something? Let me just read this quick. Yeah, healing received by 25% whilst you're in that group. That's really nice to have. I'd say in terms of what you can give to raid, and you're probably never going to use your own innovate. So there's a free innovate somewhere. There are some nice things I think it brings to the raid. If you're trying out a healer and you're worried, oh, I'm going to overheal or I'm going to run out of mana, pay a Resto Druid. You've got Nature Swiftness, Swift Mend. You're not going to get punished for overhealing. You're not going to run out of mana. It's a really nice. If you're wanting to try healing, I'd try a Resto Druid as a little a class for basically a little punishment and you know, just for having fun on it. But it's not that exciting from what I remember.
Yeah, and on the Tree of Life buff, which, yeah, obviously, like you say, it is very nice. But from looking quite in depth at our optimal raid comp and stuff like that, you're probably not going to see the Resto Druid in the main tank group, which is where you want it, really. You know, to get the most out of that buff, you want it in the main tank group. It's probably going to be in the healer group, dumped in group 5 with a couple of Holy Paladins and, you know, maybe an Affliction Warlock or whatever. You know, it's not really going to be where you actually want it, unless you are building a group specifically around, you know, making sure that you are getting that 25% of the Druid spirit as healing on the tank. But good. All right. So is there any, like we've done for the other two trees, is there any sort of real big key changes? I mean, Tree of Life is an obvious one. We can quickly talk about the ups and downs of that. Obviously, in TBC, you can't hardcast like a healing touch without it taking you out, for example. Your movement's also reduced, so if it's quite a heavy movement fight, you may be slightly more gimped than other healers because you're moving 20% slower. But, you know, ultimately, it's a really welcomed talent, I would say, to Resto. I love being in tree form, just throwing hots around and pretty much sitting AFK, talking to the stream and getting drunk. But is there anything outside of that's been added that's really strong?
Reflection has doubled from what I remember. It was 15% in Classic, top left, healing touch. It's now 30% of your mana regens whilst casting. Sorry,
what are we looking at? Oh, intensity?
Yeah. No, reflection. It's 15% in Classic. It's 30% in TBC, it's noticeable. You never run out of mana. I think you were fine without a Shadow Priest, weren't you, for the longest time?
Oh, as a Resto Druid, yeah, you shouldn't really get mana issues.
So there's some good talent changes in there. Again, the Tree of Life and things like that. Their representation in PvP is insane. I think they're probably realistically 50% of the or 60% of the top teams in 2v2 and 3v3. They're just all over the ladder. I don't know how easy they are to play in PvP, honestly, but they are very effective.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier with PvP, I think it is just you've got to understand what you're there for and what you've got to do. So I wouldn't say they're massively difficult. You'll obviously see the difference between someone who knows what they're doing and someone who don't. But ultimately, you are there to heal, but you're also there to control. So the good druids will be the good resto druids who are ranking high are the ones who understand what they're actually meant to be doing. But I suppose that goes for every class. You know, it's a bit of a broad statement, I suppose. Anything else to add on Resto Druid? I mean, we could briefly talk about the Dream State build, which I don't know if any of you have tried. I tried it, wasn't a fan, if I'm honest. I prefer Tree of Life. But Toren, have you got any experience with a Dream State build where, you know, you're going deep down to get that, you know, extra mana regen from Boomy, but also then the rest of your points go in Resto?
Yeah, I know. That's also amazingly why the rest token is like so. Like when you don't have the gear, then the Dream State is what is like pushing you up top, so you don't run out of mana in arenas. But in PvE, I haven't tried Dream State. I think.
Yeah, I've only tried it in PvE, and in PvE it was so close to sort of the classic vanilla style healing where you're just using healing touch that it was, I don't know, it just felt like a step back to me. I'll be honest with you, I think that about sums up the PvE, PvP viability of each spec. So if we do like a real quick recap, we're saying balanced druid, definitely going to want one in every 25-man raid, and obviously you'll be getting in your 10-mans. In PvP, you know, with the right sort of niche build, like a Resto Kim build, then obviously very strong because you've got strong output, still got the control, still got good healing. Feral, you can DPS, you can tank. You're not going to have a problem getting in a guild. To a point yesterday when we had Dr. Cal on the stream when we was making our raid comp for the guild, they take two feral tanks and a prop paladin. They don't even have a prop warrior because, you know, they just understand the power of feral tanks and the sort of flexibility of it as well. You know, being able to, if it was just a one tank fight and you've just got your prop paladin tanking it, you've now got 2 DPS. You're just losing nothing. It's just an overall gain. And then for Resto, you're going to want one. You're going to want one in your raid. But obviously, I think PvP, like to Pastel's point, is where you're just going to see them all over the place. That's where they're going to be very, very, very highly sought after. You're going to get your warriors, your rogues, wanting warlocks as well. Actually, SOSL warlocks, they're going to want a Resto Druid. You're going to see them everywhere. So, with that out of the way, let's have a quick couple of minutes. Not we won't go too much longer because I feel like we've really covered a lot in quite a short amount of time. To be fair, is there any sort of items? Well, actually, let's go spells first. Is there anything Cyclone we've briefly mentioned, but is there any spells that are added that we're not accustomed to in Classic that in TBC are just, you know, really good? So, I mean, what's the usefulness of Cyclone? We'll use that first, and Toren, I'll let you kick off. We are talking PvE and PvP, obviously.
Yeah, I think I need to think about this a little if there is any spells. If someone else want to go first, then they can, because as I said, I need to think about it a little.
Well,
I can.
Go on, then. Go on, QT. Go
on. When it comes to PvP, when you cast your Cyclone, the target you Cyclone, he can't get healed. So what you can do is, like, you can cast one Cyclone, that's 6 seconds, where you're on this tornado spinning thing, and then you can do it once again, and the next ER, that's 3 seconds, so that's already 9 seconds, where that guy can't get healed. So let's say you Cyclone the DPS, he can't damage, he can't get healed. The moment the Cyclone is about to run out, you can simply Cyclone the healer, and now the healer can't heal the other target, so you can just keep going like this. Of course, there's a DR, so there's time where you can't Cyclone, but then you'd like mix it with other CCs.
Yeah, definitely, and it's even got its uses in PvE. I mean, I remember, you know, on certain fights, even with you, Pastel, when we was doing Karazhan, for example, where, you know, we'd be using our Cyclones on the ads on Aran, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the other abilities that have been added, I mean, off the top of my head, I've not got anything open. So, I mean, obviously, Bear's got Lacerate.
Yeah, you've got your own threats built into Lacerate now, so it doesn't matter how much damage you do. You're actually just generating threat, like it's built in, much like Sunder. So it's a nice thing to have.
Yeah, and then Cat's got Maim, which we spoke about Maim and its usefulness. Obviously, Resto Druid's got Life Bloom. I mean, we know we've spoke about Life Bloom when we're talking about the Resto tree, but I mean, what an amazing heal! And when I say Resto's got it,
yeah, everyone's got it.
Yeah, you use it as Cat, don't you, regularly, or even as a Bear?
It's powerful and across the board. Boom can get it, Feral get it. It's just a baseline ability, and it's strong in all of them. You don't have to be Resto to make use of Life Bloom. You could be questing and be on 5% HP. You pop 3 Life Blooms on yourself, go into Cat form. When that blooms, you're going to be topped without a doubt.
Yeah, 100%. So
and then of course you have Mangle too, so the leveling is going to be really really easy. And I think there's like one spell that is even more important. That's Flight Form.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, how have we spoke about Druids for this long and not spoke about the fact that you get free flying?
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously you can fly at 68, and that is such a big advantage over every other class, like a mind-blowing advantage. And obviously, again, while we're talking about Druids in TBC, once you do your epic Flight Form quest, you can now summon Anzu, which is an extra boss in Sefek Halls, heroic, which can drop, a very, very sought-after mount, the Ravenlord mount. So again, more reason why you need Druids. I don't think there's many other abilities. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I think we've actually covered every new ability: Cyclone, Lacerate, Maim, Life Bloom. There's certainly not anything else that's been added in TBC that would excite me, anyway.
I think Barkskin got its punishment reduced from it, so you no longer get the 20% attack speed punishment now. You can just Barkskin freely, and it's not a boon to you, but you still can't do it in forms. That wasn't introduced till Wrath.
You cannot do it in forms, but you can do it while being stunned or CC'd. So
Yeah.
that's really great. If you, like, for example, get caught by Rogue in your human form, and he's like cheap shotting, kidney shotting you can use Barkskin, and that's 20% of damage reduction on top of that. So that's really great. And also no casting speed reduction and attack speed reduction, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So yeah, there's small little changes to. Well, yeah. I mean, Barkskin actually is probably one of the biggest ones that's been changed, I would say. So really briefly, and we will keep this brief because I think we've been going for a while. I've not really checked on the time yet. It's been a good hour and a half, I would say, so far. So I'd just like to end with Toren, Pastel, obviously fake QT. I know you're going to mage, so I'm going to have to sort of exclude you from this, but I will include you, and it will make sense in a second. So Toren, in a classic TBC launch, what spec will you be playing as a Druid?
Definitely Feral Druid. Right now I'm playing Elemental in PvE, like proving that meme is not such a meme and it's like viable. But in TBC, definitely Druid, because like that's my prime class.
And you're going to be like are you going for main tank or?
Yeah, probably main tank, because the guild I'm with in Classic, they know me from TBC private servers, so they're gonna entrust me with the main tanking, and then the PvP and main tanking mostly.
Cool. And Pastel, what's your preference? What you're going to go for? I know this already, but
You already know. I like to shot call. I like to be at the tank, leading the charge. I like to control the pace of the raid. I'm just going to be running through stuff as a tank, not slowing down really.
all right. So look, I'm gonna just to be different because we know I'm gonna go feral, but for the sake of what we're about to discuss, I'm gonna say that I'm going boomkin in TBC. I'm not, but it will just at least add a little bit of variety to this. And then QT, if if you've got any items, so we're going to be talking about items. So what are a couple of items each that you're going to or even a set or whatever that you're going to gun for early as that spec? So, as I say, QT, I appreciate you're not going to play a Druid, but if there's some items that you can think of, that we forgot or maybe we should be going for. So we're talking now, you've dinged 70, you're getting yourself your attunements done and stuff like that. What's like two or even three standout items, Toren, that you're going to be going for early? Sorry, I didn't mean to pick on you while you was having a swig of your drink.
Yeah, my cup of tea. Well, definitely although I'm tank, I'm definitely gonna keep my Wolfset helm because it's still amazing in TBC. It's DPS helmet for PvE DPSing, and I think also in first 2 seasons in PvP, it's like gonna be my go-to helm because of that sweet power shifting. And then definitely I'm gonna look out for the 2 ring, which is World Drop, World BOE, and it's giving plus 22 of each of the main stats, so that strength, agility, spirit, blah blah blah. Because that one is really amazing for PvP and arena because of the Heart of the Wild, you get a lot of value out of those stats. So also definitely looking for that ring. But other than that, I mean, Cleft Hoof set and just go for some good feral weapon. Probably the Cineral Circle. Nothing too fancy, I would say, as a tank. Basically what I can get my hands on. Definitely incorporating PvP items.
Yeah, I knew either you or Pastel or both was going to mention Earth Warden, because Earth Warden's from Cenarian Expedition Rep, if you didn't know, which is a very, very, very easy, obtainable, and strong feral tank weapon. But go on, Pastel. So what are you looking forward to? You might as well start with Earth Warden.
Yeah, Earth Warden definitely. It's got expertise, it's got the attack power. It's relatively. I mean, you'll get it before Karazhan if you're determined enough. You'll get it before Karazhan probably. If you're doing everything right, if you're doing dungeons before quests and doing it the correct way around, you'll probably get your Exalted before you even hit Karazhan, which will give you a massive boost. It's not vital if you don't. You'll still do well. I think there's a Grand arena weapon, which is not bad at all.
Yeah.
I'll probably keep things like DFT for a while for the hit and the dodge and attack power. I don't think there are many great trinkets. I even think the armor item from Classic, the armor trinkets, which is that'll be there for a while. I think. I don't think I'll replace that immediately.
Yeah. Are we talking about the one from killing Blackhand or whatever it is? Yeah, the clearing UBRS.
No, but the alchemy one that gives you armor.
Oh, the alchemy one.
Like, yeah, it'll be bonus armor. And to be honest, for tanking, I probably think I'll be using MCPs up to like 62. I'll just be using all my leftover MCPs up to 62, and then I'll use whatever weapon I've got.
Yeah, and I think that is going to be the way to go. I think we discussed that actually, didn't we, on a previous podcast?
Yeah, I don't know how prevalent they're going to be at 70. Probably not, compared to a lot of the stuff you've got. But I mean, if you've got leftover ones, don't throw them away. Use them because they're still going to be great.
Yeah, agree. All right, so me personally, as a boomy, what I would be going for early, obviously Quagmiran's Eye is just an obvious one. So yeah, Slave Pen's heroic last boss. It's just so big and lasts so long as well that it's really strong. And then I'll be honest with you, outside of that, it would be the sort of hit items that are quite lacking early on. So like Mantle of Three Terrors, I believe it's called, from Black Morass, first boss. I want to say first boss. Hit and spell power shoulders. There's quite a few things, and definitely the crit trinket from the last boss in Alcatraz. There's a lot as a boomy. You've got a lot of options. At the end of the day, you use leather. There are some leather items that are decent, and you've got the option of cloth as well, which the warlocks in the group are not going to appreciate, but unlucky. There's a lot to go for. But personally, I mean, if I had to pick 2 items, I would actually say Quagmiran's Eye, and depending on the itemization, Braces of Havoc, which are actually I think they're level 69, a tailoring crafted pair of braces, which are just so good for what they are.
I realise I've just glazed over the thick cleft hoof set completely. I will not be missing this out. This will be probably one of the things I get before I can even equip it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, at the end of the day, I reckon there's going to be 1 or 2 level workers in the guild.
So yeah, they'll be very rich after that, won't they?
Go on, Toren.
Okay. I could also add I'm not sure which trinket the Pastel meant, but the trinket Badge of Tenacity, which is getting from the not Blasted Lands, the Bled's Edge Mountains.
A gorilla,
it's
the gorilla rep.
drakes around the Ogrilla stuff, and it's giving a lot of armor and also not proc, but the active stuff on the trinket, which is giving you a lot of agility, and it has only 1.5 second cooldown, which is one of the fastest recharging trinkets out of the whole game, because most of them are like 2 minutes. So that one is really great. You can get it before stepping into Karazhan or any kind of raids, but it's like still a little bit grindy to get. But it's something I think it's not going to be replaced fairly early.
It probably won't be available at launch, though.
What phase is it again?
The Agrilla didn't come out until Black Temple, I want to say.
I think you could farm the depleted, but you couldn't upgrade it from depleted for a long time.
That's possible. I've actually had a discussion with someone during this podcast, actually, about it, because I put it on a pre-BIS feral tank video, and then it was an oversight. It wasn't until I realised that, oh, hang on, yeah, it's a gorilla. That's not going to be there. The chances of those sort of dailies being available at launch are basically just it's not going to happen, is it? You know, they need to phase the content, and that's even if you went into a 2.4.3 itemization, they're still going to gate everything else, as in like the Neverwing dailies, the Agrilla dailies, and you know everything else. But it is an amazing trinket. Don't get me wrong. And yeah, as actually the guy who I was talking to on the stream, Vince, shout out to Vince, tanking pre-BIS is double NG stam trinkets prior to Black Temple. Was he saying Black Temple? Prior to the Badger Tenacity, sorry. Yeah, which again, I've plugged that in the engineering video. I think it's 51 stamina, and then it's got like the ranged pull as well that you can use. Yeah, it is really strong. That's what I would personally be going for. Is there anything you want to add, QT, either from a feral, resto, balance perspective? Any items that you think people should be gunning for early?
I mean, you three have covered feral and balance, and yeah, I haven't played resto Druid myself, but I know when I play with like some hardcore people, they always go Tater to craft a primal Moonclub set because it's so OP. A lot of intellect, a lot of healing, a lot of spirit and mana. So like, if you're thinking about doing like Mr. Druid and you want to min-max, you should definitely do tailoring because Primal Moonclub set is really good. If we talk about like classic items in TBC, the Darkmoon card, Blue Dragon, I could see that be like really, really good, where you get like 100% of your mana regen. So like, if you have a lot of spirit, I could see that becoming really, really good. And if I was 70, I would probably farm Shatar Rep for the epic healing weapon. So yeah, that's those three things.
Yeah, and all really good points. I mean, we didn't really cover the crafted sets, but yeah, as a resto druid, I mean, even as a feral druid, obviously the primal strike set is really, really nice. The free set, I use that on endless still. The balance set is not too bad. Yeah, we've had a lot of debates over whether you should go tailoring as a boomy or level working, just because obviously spell strike and spell fire. That's the arcane one, isn't it? That obviously it's really strong, but then the balance set from level working is actually quite nice as well because you can use it if you wanted to heal or DPS. So that's a bit more of a hybrid-y set, but yeah, crafted sets, fake QT, 100%. Yeah, Primal Moonclub as a resto druid, can't argue with that at all. So, I would say, unless anybody has got anything else that we haven't really gone into massive detail on that we want to cover, I'd say we're done. And I think Druid, in a fantastic place. Anyone who wants to main a Druid in TBC, I think you're laughing, really. Got loads of options.
Yeah, it's the lowest representation in Classic, but it's probably one of the top representations in TBC. It just completely top ends because everything improves.
Yeah, definitely.
There is nothing that gets worse for Feral, for Druid in general in TBC. Everything gets better. I can't think of any nerfs to Feral from Classic to TBC. It just constantly gets better.
Yeah, and then go into Wrath and it gets even better. They progressively just get better and better, which is nice to see. Toren, have you got anything to add?
I think not. Like, I was definitely to chat with you guys, and yeah, it was amazing. I think nothing else for now.
Cool. QT, anything to add?
Nope.
All right. Well, in that case, obviously, Toren, Pastel, Fake QT, thank you for coming. Obviously, Fake QT, I'll see you on Sunday. And Toren and Pastel, obviously, both of you, it would be great to get you back on at some point, when it's relevant. Obviously, I appreciate we're probably not going to get you on for the next 7. We've got 7 different classes to get through, so obviously we want as much representation from people who are main in those classes. But definitely after that, get you on for some of the general stuff. It would be good if you come back.
No, yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was very fun. I'm going to go and try drag my world buffs over safely now and hopefully not die.
Oh, good luck. What are you raiding tonight?
I think we're just doing AQ20 because we actually did all the other stuff on the Wednesday. We did a long raid night. We did like 3 or 4 raids.
Well, buffs for AQ20. That's serious business.
Well, I like to pass. Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to be throwing out the MCPs, I may as well get the world buffs as well. I'm not farming them for nothing, am I?
I'm a man after my own heart. But yeah, thanks guys. Toren, as I say, yeah, it'd be great to get you back on at some point. Thanks for coming. Fake QT, Pastel. Peace out, boys.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.